Hey, everybody, this is Josh for another episode of the Solopreneur Grind podcast. Very happy to be joined by the CEO and founder of Lifestar, Joe Rando. Joe, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm excited to jump in, Joe, because number one, you've had a very successful career previously. And then now what you're really focused on is a lot of tools, community, podcasts, stuff like that for solopreneurs. That's obviously in our
Yeah.
lifeblood as well. So I think it'll be a really good conversation. But for those who haven't heard of you, can you give us a quick introduction, a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Well, my background, I have a kind of a weird background. I got a degree in physics, worked as a optical engineer for a while, but then ended up going from there to grabbing an MBA and then developing shopping centers. So I was developing shopping centers back in the 90s when Home Depot and those big box stores were coming in, and that was great. But I developed some software to figure out where to put the shopping centers. And that ended up becoming a separate company. The first version of it failed in the late 90s because of the internet and people didn't care about stores. And then I gave it a rebirth with a partner and we turned it into a company called Trade Area Systems. Ended up being an enterprise software company for Fortune 500 companies, retailers and kind of retail real estate companies that, developed shopping centers and malls. Sold that in 2020, kind of figured out what I wanted to do and started Lifestar and just saw that there were so many solopreneurs out there. Didn't see a place for them to come together as a group. It was all kinds of little groups, but they all have the same challenges, which I proved by doing a survey of over 300 of them. It's all about lead gen, sales, and productivity. So
Hmm.
we figured we could address those issues and help solopreneurs build businesses that serve their lives, because that's why you should be doing it as a solopreneur, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. Can you tell me, so that company that sounds like it got pretty big and then sold, how many employees were in that company? And then my follow-up to that question is, what led you to kind of, at least it sounds like, flip the switch and go from like big enterprise software company to helping solopreneurs?
So we had about 25 employees when we sold it. It wasn't a huge company, but it was very profitable, great customer retention. I think our expected customer lifetime was 20 years. Not that we had been in business that long, but if you did the math, that was how long you expected an average customer to last. So it was a great business. We got to work with a lot of really good people. People in that industry are just good folks. And, what led me to it, honestly, was I had an idea for a product, which was what started that in the first place. I had an idea for a product I wanted to buy, couldn't buy it, so I built it, and that ended up becoming Trade Area Systems. I had an idea for a product that I wanted to buy, couldn't find it, and decided to build it. And it was a kind of a combination of a task manager and and a social network, a way to work with anybody, not just people that were using that same app or the paid version or on your team. But as we started building it, I said, well, where are we going to market it? And I work with a woman named Carly Reese, she's a fractional CMO. She said, well, why don't we go after solopreneurs? Because, they don't have teams. So it's natural. And I said, great, where do we find them? And we couldn't really find any place to find them. And then I saw how many tens of millions of solopreneurs there are, even in the US. And I said, wait a minute, let's build a place for them first.
Hmm.
So we kind of pivoted and built out Lifestar Central, we call it, and it's got the community, lots of AI tools, and just various things that solopreneurs need to run their business better and help each other.
Very cool. And it's definitely one of those themes now that I've done 130 plus episodes, and maybe you can relate as a fellow podcaster. Eventually, you start noticing themes. And definitely one of them that pops up a decent amount is people who've started companies scratching their own itch. We've heard it before, but I just see it time and time again. So I find that super interesting. Can you talk about, and maybe you can talk about in both cases. So when starting Lifestar and when starting that
Trade
enterprise
area systems.
company,
Yeah.
how did you go about getting those first few clients? And maybe another way of asking this is like, what's some advice for some solopreneurs out there to kind of like validate and get their first couple clients?
Well, I think part of the answer to that isn't helpful, but part of it is with trade area systems, we got our first clients by virtue of basically networking, right? It was people that I knew in the industry. put me in touch with other people, and that was how it was done. It was it was personal. It wasn't, you know, running ads or anything else like that. It was just knowing people. The same thing with Lifestar. I mean, with Lifestar, I had a network on LinkedIn, would find new solopreneurs, reach out to them on LinkedIn, invite them to a free event that we put on 2 free events a month. One is called Solopreneur Success Sessions, and it's just like a workshop or a micro conference on a topic of interest to solopreneurs. And the other one is called Solopreneur Problem Solvers, and that's basically break out into breakout rooms and help each other address your current challenges. And they're free, and we just bring people in. They see that there's a benefit, get some value, and from there they join what we call Lifestar Intro, which is our free tier, and we get to know them better in the community.
Very cool. And I'm assuming listeners can take from both of those answers, because you said one of them might not be as helpful, but like,
Well, no, there's another part of it that
oh, you
had
skipped the less
I
helpful
skipped that
part.
one. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll walk you through it, but it was a strange one.
Okay,
So
got it. So talking about what you're focused on right now, Joe, which is Lifestar, can you talk a little bit about the industry? You mentioned tens of millions of solopreneurs in the U.S., but like, what's your take on the solopreneur industry right now, and where do you kind of see it going?
well, I see it certainly. I see it growing. The there's just, I mean, people are being put into a situation where they need to become solopreneurs. I'm seeing a lot of activity with older workers kind of moving into solopreneurship, people that are getting, you know, retired or, let go north of 50. And so there's a group that's dedicated to helping those people that I've done some events with. So I see that certainly as one. I think part of it to me, and I know you know this as well, is that, we think about solopreneurs and people kind of jump to like content creators and influencers, and most solopreneurs are just doing jobs. They're doing work that they like to do, hopefully, and they're doing it on their own terms, but it's not, you know, making money off of, YouTube videos and ads and endorsing products. They're just doing work. They're coaches, they're consultants, they're contractors, freelancers, and they're just people that basically want to do something that they're good at on their own terms and for their own benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see a lot of that as well. So I mean, myself too. One of my, probably like my original solopreneur business is I'm just a lawyer who works alone.
Mhm.
And, a lot, I'm seeing that a lot in law as well, where people are just like, I don't want to go work at a big firm under all these partners and, old school this and not very innovative that. And they maybe just love an area of law, or maybe they're an accountant, or maybe they're, whatever,
Mhm.
right? As you said, kind of like insert profession here. So, and I believe it'll become more fragmented, and more solopreneurs kind of doing it as their own as well. Can you talk to a little bit about, let's touch on productivity, which you alluded to previously, for those working alone, and maybe this is also an option to touch on some of the tools or strategies within your community. But what are some tips related to productivity that you can give to solopreneurs, especially those who are maybe just starting out or like actually on their own? They don't even have contractors or anything like that yet.
Well, that would be the place to start, right? I mean, if you can possibly outsource the things that, that you're not good at or don't add a lot of value to or hate doing, or some combination of those, then that's a really great place to start. Because let's face it, trying to do every aspect of a business, I had a great morning, right? I just finished off and sent off the last chapter of Solopreneur Business for Dummies, which is going to coming out in October. And I look at this book, and it's, well, it's almost 400 pages. And you think about all the things that you have to do to start and run a solopreneur business, and it's a lot. And so people that try to do it all themselves, a lot of times find themselves in a productivity crisis, because they're working too many hours. They're changing gears too often. And of course, changing gears costs you time, right? If you go from doing job A to job B, well, there's this kind of, you got to rearrange your brain around it, get organized around it. And so it costs a lot of overhead, time overhead, to do all the jobs. So getting outsourced is one of the first things you can do. Also, automating and all that kind of stuff. But where I would start, I think this is the important place that people miss sometimes, is before you do any of that, you need standard operating procedures that you've documented, right? You need to sit down on any given job that you're doing, document how it should be done step by step. And that way, if you want to outsource it, you've got basically a script that you can hand off. If you want to automate it, you've got a document to work from to do the automation. And also, you're at the point now, if you've documented it and it's working, you know that you're going to be automating or outsourcing a process that actually does what you want it to do. So that's the a step I think a lot of people miss, is getting those documents down and having all those processes, in writing, on whatever it is. It could be a Word document, a spreadsheet, it could be a Loom video, whatever, but somewhere that stuff is documented. So that's, I think, maybe a step that people miss with regard to productivity.
Awesome. Yeah, totally agree. What would you say, Joe, now working with all the solopreneurs that you do, would you say is the hardest or the biggest challenge that solopreneurs face, and what do you typically try to help them with?
Well, the survey told the story, and nothing since we've done the survey has changed it. Number one challenge is lead generation. And, the hard part is that things that used to work don't really work anymore. I mean, SEO, I think about SEO. And there was a time when, you could go in, if you cranked out enough blogs, you could show up on the first page of Google on a topic. Well, the race is over. The big guys have won. So unless you're, doing some really niche kind of thing that people happen to also be searching for, which is a pretty unusual combination of something that's really specific and rare and something people are searching for, you're not going to win the SEO game as a solopreneur. So, that's a place where just the game has changed, and people are really struggling with lead gen because well, I got all my content, but where are the customers? And it's almost like I was a huge inbound fan. I mean, I thought inbound marketing was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I still do. But I think we got to think a little more about outbound now, right? So maybe it's not cold calling, but what I recommend is for solopreneurs to find some way to add value, to do something useful, engage your target customers and target prospects with something that's just something to give them, not necessarily a PDF that says, here's my checklist of 5 things to do to whatever, but something that involves an investment from the recipient. So that's why we do the events, right? If we put on an event and people come, they're investing time. We don't charge them any money, but they're putting time in. So now we know we've got somebody that's serious. Instead of somebody clicking on a link, they give me their email, they download my white paper or my checklist or whatever it is, and it sits on their hard disk, and they never look at it. And I'm sending them emails that they never open. So it's just, having that kind of investment on the part of the recipient, but basically building that trust before you start asking for a sale is, I think, kind of the new, I used to joke that events are the new content, because it was a really good way of engaging people with something that they had to invest, something in terms of time.
Yeah, I really like that. And I was talking to someone this week about how the cold emails I get every week now, it's just insane, because I think everyone's kind of like defaulting to it, and it's just nuts. But both in terms of email and cold DMs that are obviously automated on LinkedIn, and it's just like right to the sale. So I think that's a great idea, to kind of lead with events that actually provide value as sort of like a lead gen tool. Joe, my next question is kind of like taking it a little bit of a step further. Is, let's say there's a listener out there right now and they haven't started their business, they have an idea for a business, they've been wanting to start it for a while, they haven't been able to for a wide variety of reasons. What are 5 key steps you would give to any aspiring solopreneur right now to get a business off the
I
ground?
got to make sure I get the 5 in order here.
And take a few seconds. I'll maybe
No,
even
no,
buy
it's
you
all,
a
it's
few
all
extra
good.
seconds here.
So the first thing, no matter what you're doing, and this really goes for anything you do in your life, but especially for solopreneurs starting a business, start with your goals. Why are you starting a solopreneur business? If the thing is, if you want to be a billionaire, well, don't forego employees, right? It just makes no sense to forego your employees if you're trying to become a billionaire, because they're your best scaling tool. So if you're foregoing employees, there's a reason. And the reason is that employees involve a lot of responsibility, a lot more than contractors. But so the first thing is, what are your goals in starting a solopreneur business? They could be, anything from, I want to go to my kids' games. I want to be done at 5 o'clock every day. I only want to do the work I want to do. We have a bunch of people I want to live anywhere I want to live, which is amazing to me. I see these people, and one week they're in Vietnam, and the next week they're in Austria, and that's awesome. But have that understanding of what it is that your goals are, because once you've done that, now you can start designing a business that meets those goals. If you don't, you could wind up running a business that you don't like running. And I did do that once, and it was not fun. That was a long time ago, fortunately. But anyway, so that's step one, is define your goals. From there, you have to start thinking in terms of what kinds of businesses can serve those goals effectively that you can do. We talk about, ikigai, which is great. I mean, it is not an ancient Japanese. It's an ancient Japanese word, but the concept of the Venn diagrams, the ancient Japanese weren't that big on Venn diagrams. So that was done in like 2015 by some Spanish computer scientist or something. But the concept is good, and you want to find something that matches, something you're what is it? Something you're good at, something that you're passionate about, something you can be paid for, and something the world needs. And that's great, but it also better match your goals. If you could imagine putting all those pieces together and not be able to make it to your kids' games because you have to travel all week or whatever. So that's the next thing, is, this ikigai thing. And one of the things that I stress it whenever I talk about ikigai is, not everybody gets all four of those things, right? You definitely want to get paid, but sometimes you can do work that maybe you're not passionate about, but you don't mind it, and it gives you the freedom to meet your goals, and that can be a perfectly acceptable solution. So, I mean, that's the next step, is to define a business that makes sense, that serves your goals. And then from there, you got to start thinking about how you're going to put it together, right? It's a process of saying, hey, what are the pieces I need to get this off the ground? How am I going to do it? I'm a huge fan of starting with a side hustle, because, if you just quit your job and try to go out there and make a business run, and you're the primary breadwinner in the family, that can really get disastrous fast. I mean, if it's the kind of thing where your partner is making enough money to survive and you can give it a shot, great. But if not, that side hustle approach, a lot of solopreneurs started with a side hustle, got to that point where they knew that if they pulled the plug on the job, they could make enough or make more than they were making working the job. So that's a really good thing to consider. So now I think I'm at 3.
Mhm.
After that, test and iterate, right? You're going to try putting the thing out there. It's probably not going to work the way you planned initially, but just be ready to try new things. One of the biggest mistakes I've made in my life is going out, having an idea for something and building it to perfection and then launching it. And then I read about this guy that basically had an idea for a product, knew he could build it, but didn't. He ran ads for it and got orders, and then basically said, hey, I'm out of stock. I can give you your money back, or you can wait till I get it in stock. Went and actually manufactured the thing and shipped it. And I'm like, he proved a concept before he wasted a nickel building out the prototype or building out the product. And I like, that's brilliant. So that's another one that I would suggest is, before you go too crazy, just find a way to kind of quickly determine whether there's demand. And that leads to maybe the last one, which is talk to people, talk to potential customers, talk to people that know your potential customers, but get feedback, find out about the pain points, find out how they really feel about them, how badly do they feel the pain points, how ready are they to look for a solution to those particular pain points, what are they willing to pay. Doing that kind of homework and research before you completely launch is a huge way to avoid launching a business that stalls, doesn't get off the ground.
I love it. I love it. Very actionable, very helpful, makes a lot of sense. Can you maybe top that off too, Joe, with maybe 2 or 3 tools, or really any suggestions that solopreneurs could be using, systems, tools,
Sure.
AI, this, that, or the other, to maybe help do some or all of those things a little bit faster?
So with AI, is great for so many things. So I'll kind of leave that as kind of a, that's just, I mean, you can use that. Just don't use it to create your content for you. You can help you, but don't be one of those people that says, write a blog about podcasting and then put that on your website. But I would say for the three things we talked about, lead gen, sales, and productivity. So lead gen, I really like LinkedIn Sales Navigator. I am able to identify solopreneurs using that, and I probably miss one in a couple of hundred is wrong, so 0.5%. So I'm able to identify them, and then I get to reach out to them and, invite them to an event. And it's really great. It's a really great way to connect with people. And so that's lead gen. That's one of my favorites. It's not cheap, but it's not crazy expensive. I think it's, I don't know, like either 80 to 100 and change a month. I can't remember. But then for sales, I mean, to me, the best thing you can do in sales is to learn how to sell. Selling is a skill. I was a terrible salesperson. I was one of those people that would want to show the I'll call them the victim, every feature of our software. Look, it does this, it does, and they go, oh, well, that's great, thanks, yeah. And oh, well, let me show you, it does this, and they're ready to buy, and I would continue showing off all the hundreds of features, and it's a huge mistake, but it's just a skill. And if there's different books. There's a thing called Mastering Influence by Tony Robbins. It's, a digital, an audio course that he did that was really good. And just understanding that sales is about helping people. It's about solving people's problems. It's not about, Glengarry Glen Ross, if you know the reference, and always be closing. It's really about finding out if the person has the pain points you solve, exploring those pain points with them, and explaining, showing them that, they can have a better, experience with your product or service. So I think with selling, it's just kind of overcoming that, the lack of skills that many of us have, and understanding the real nature of sales is helping people, not conning them. And lastly, for productivity, one of the life changes for me, because I am a naturally very disorganized person, spent a chunk of my life very frustrated with my inability to keep things, organized and straight, and missing deadlines and things. There's a book written by a guy named David Allen called Getting Things Done. And not only did it change my life, it inspired that software I was talking about a little while ago that I started to build. But it's basically a process for dealing with all the stuff coming at you, right? And I won't go into the details of it, but it's just a way of basically processing all this stuff you're dealing with and not having anything fall through the cracks. And, keeping lists of the things that you need to do, a list of things that other people are doing for you, tracking projects, so on. So that would be my recommendation in terms of productivity.
Got it. So getting it done, learn how to sell, and LinkedIn Sales Nav. That's a great list.
Yeah.
Joe, this has been really great, really helpful. My last question is always to any of the listeners out there. Maybe they have a solopreneur business, maybe they're thinking of one, maybe they're struggling to get it off the ground. What's one last key piece of advice that you'd give to them?
So for everybody, well, I'm gonna do a shameless plug because that's exactly who we serve. Join Lifestarr. It's free. Lifestarr, www.lifestarr.com. It's 2 R's and star. I know you're going to put a link in, but 2 R's and star.com/intro. And that will get you into our free community. And there are people there that are just getting started. There are people there that are extremely successful solopreneurs and everything in between. I'm there. Carly Reese, our fractional CMO, is there. So we got lots of smart people. I don't know if you know who George B. Thomas is. He's a marketing and HubSpot expert. He's there. You come in, there's just ask questions, get to know people. It's great fun. And so that's, again, shameless plug, sorry, but that's the one piece of advice I give to people that are already established or thinking about starting, because that's what we built it for.
Okay. Well, I don't have to ask my extra last question, which is usually to let people know where they can find you. Or maybe if they want to reach out personally, where would you recommend? Is LinkedIn best?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. It's, whatever it is, /N Joe Rando. Um, and if you're interested, I know, you've got a podcast here for solopreneurs. We have one as well called The Aspiring Solopreneur. And if anybody's interested in that, we're coming up on 200 episodes, which is amazing. But just all stuff about solopreneurs, from getting started to, running the business. And so if you want to check that out as well. So yeah, this was great fun though. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate it. We're going to include links to the community as well as the podcast in the description, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform. Joe, thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.